Hey, welcome to Crispi. Today we're going to talk a little bit about insulation and what that means in a Crispi boot. It's that time of season, we got snow falling, the temperatures are getting cold, and it's time to move into an insulated boot. So I have Lars Anderson here with me, and we're going to talk and go through the different insulation types and levels that we have at Crispi. So Lars, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a rundown on our insulation. You know, we say we have a 200 gram all the way up to an 800 gram, but maybe you could explain a little bit about what that means to us and what those insulation types are for our boots.
Yeah, so before we dive too deep into this, I kind of want to give a little insulation rundown. Just so people are aware, the insulation is very subjective per person. Like my 200 gram insulation, maybe you're non-insulated, or maybe someone else's 800 gram. So that's why we don't put a temperature rating on any of our boots, just because it's so versatile, just dependent on the person.
That's right.
So like for me personally, I run cold. So if I'm going to be sitting, not moving a whole lot, I'm going to want to go to a higher insulation, like a 400 or an 800 gram insulate boot.
Right.
So just make people aware of that. Just to dive right into it, I want to cover our 200 gram insulate boots. We have our Brickstall Pro SF, our Brickstall Pro, our Nevada, our Guide, and our Hunter. So all of these boots, for me personally, are going to be my mid to late season boots for when I'm moving a lot, rifle deer hunting here in the West. Anywhere for me, it's probably be about 40 degrees to about 60 degrees. That's kind of going to be my temperature if I'm moving quite a bit. And then you jump into this 400 gram range where you have the Wild Rock and the Shimmick, which are both phenomenal boots. They're going to be a little bit colder in my temperature range. I don't know about for you, but the Shimmick is what I'm going to be wearing if I go to North Dakota and chase pheasants and it's 15 degrees, but I'm still moving quite a bit, and I just need a lightweight boot. And then this 400 gram Wild Rock is what I'm going to be wearing if I'm going to hunt the front, sit in a stand, or anything like that, where I have to walk 4 to 5 miles, but then I'm going to sit in a stand for quite some time, just because I don't want to jump up to the 800 quite yet, just because I am still doing that long hike and I don't want to sweat my feet out.
Right.
Then we have the Wild Rock Plus, which is going to be an 800 gram Gore-Tex Durtherm insulate on that one, and that's going to be your extreme cold weather boot. So if you are hiking maybe a little bit into his tree stand, but you're sitting in 0 to 32 degrees and you're sitting for long periods of time, that's going to be your go-to boot. Or if you're just in extremely cold temperatures up in Montana, North Dakota, anywhere where it gets extremely cold, that's when you're going to want to look into that Wild Rock Plus.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about it's kind of independent. So everybody's going to be a little bit different because out in the West, we're used to cold, and northern Montana is used to really cold. But down in the South, turkey hunters, right, or whitetail hunters, when it gets 50 degrees, it could be freezing for them. So an 800 gram insulated boot is what they're looking for. Where, you know, at 60 degrees for us, we're running, you know, or 50 degrees, we're running a 200 gram. So it really does come down to the individual hunter. And if you have questions, call us and we'll talk through that with you just to kind of help guide you to which insulation type is good for you and in your particular hunt. But Lars, if you wouldn't mind, let's talk a little bit about the insulation that we use in these boots and why we use those insulation.
Yeah, so in most of our boots, other than the standard Wild Rock, we're going to use a Gore-Tex Durtherm insulation. So that insulation is actually going to be built into that Gore-Tex liner, whether it's a 200 gram, a 400, or an 800 gram, it's going to be built in there. And the reason why we go with the Gore-Tex Durtherm is we found that it's going to be the highest quality insulation, and it's actually still going to be warm when compressed, which makes a big difference because for the most part, you are going to be compressed. From lacing your boots down, tightening them up, anything like that. It's also just going to help get that moisture out of the boots a lot easier.
They use a dot gluing with that, right? So what happens and can happen with some insulations is they'll adhere it to the Gore-Tex, but they'll layer it with glue. So then you lose that breathability.
Yeah.
And so with these Gore-Tex insulations that we use, they use a dot gluing so that it still allows the heat and stuff to escape and the sweat escape your boot from the inside.
Yep, that is correct. And then we also used a Primaloft insulate. And one of the reasons why we went with the Primaloft and the standard Wild Rock is just because it's an extremely high quality insulation that's going to keep your feet extremely warm, especially when you are in those wetter climates, such as snow or even just high humidity or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about some tips and tricks on these boots. You know, oftentimes we'll wear an insulated boot and it's warm while we're hiking in the snow and it's 20 degrees, but then we'll sit to glass. And you know, or you climb out to a tree stand and you maybe have 2 miles to get to a tree stand. You get in there and you sit in that tree stand and your feet start getting cold. So what are a couple tips and tricks that you often share with people when they call in on how to keep their feet a little warmer? Is it in socks? Is it in lacing? Is it a combination?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a combination of things. A lot of people think that if you put on 2 pairs of socks or 3 pairs of socks, it's going to add insulation and you're going to have warm feet, but it's actually quite the opposite. I mean, you do get a little bit of insulating factors there by having multiple pairs of socks, but it's actually going to cut off circulation to the entire foot. So then you're not getting that warmth from your blood throughout the entire foot.
And you lose that airflow that you need to have.
Yep, that's exactly. So what we generally recommend is a high quality merino sock, whether that's a lightweight, midweight, or heavyweight. And we generally just recommend it to more fit your boot rather than just added insulation. And we kind of let the boot's insulation do the work there. Another thing that we recommend to people that are going to tree stand or sitting and glassing for long periods of time is keeping an extra pair of socks in your backpack, just so then when you do get to the stand or get to your glassing point where you can just swap out socks and then you have a completely dry pair of socks and you just slip them in your boots, and then keep that boot a little bit loose in the forefoot area, then a little bit tighter up top, just so that you have that air circulation around your foot, and it's actually going to keep your foot significantly warmer.
That's great information. In these, you know, I know we don't offer a range of temperature for these boots, but if we were to try to do that, for me, I think that when people are calling in and asking, again, it is kind of dependent on you and what location you're at. But we find that this boot, the 200 series, is really good for somebody from like 60 down to 40s, generally, right? That 400 is going to be, again, geographic dependent and how thick your blood is, but generally that 400 is going to be good for, you know, in the 30s and 20s and sometimes, you know, upper teens, and then that 800 is for, you know, the really, really cold area. So, but if you do have any questions on insulation, the Crispi, you know, insulations that we have and the types and the grams that we carry, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We have a lot of great boots to offer, and you'll be able to find a boot that will keep your foot nice and warm through these late season hunts. So if you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to give us a call. We're happy to talk to you.